This one is a funny one. Hello, welcome back, and I'm here again to cover more Samsung products that everyone wants, but no one can afford. That's a good one, Zoe. Except today I am covering the all-new iPad Pro Mini LED. I got you, right? I switched it up on you. Anyways, let's go ahead and jump in. This is my full review of this guy here. Let's take it in. Now, if you've been keeping up with the videos, at least within the past couple of weeks, then you probably knew that I picked up the newest iPad Pro Mini LED here after I actually picked up the 11 inches. And that was simply because that 11 inches one, which by the way is also running the M1 chip, just didn't offer me anything new in terms of user experience when compared to my previous 2020 iPad Pro. So I went ahead and picked up this guy here in hopes that this larger size here would offer me a slightly different user experience when compared to the 11 inches, at least based off of the size. You know, the UI should remain the same, but based off of that size, my hope is that it's slightly different. Plus, you have the mini LED on here. Also, as a heads up, if you did watch the 11 inches iPad Pro review, I appreciate that, but you may actually find some, similarities between that iPad and this one, and that's simply because the internals are the same. So do accept my apologies as I kind of repeat myself here, covering stuff that I've already covered with the 11 inches. As I said already, this 12.9 inches iPad Pro has offered me something slightly different with that user experience. And just the form factor alone makes it already very different than using an 11 inches. Now remember, the 11 inches, I was coming from an 11 inches 2020 iPad Pro. So just looking at it, the biggest and most obvious difference is the size, right? So let's dive into the specs and performance and all that good stuff. The configuration that I have here is the base 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of internal storage, which ran me roughly about $1,100. It's also available in 256 gigs, 512 gigs, 1 and 2 terabyte storage, and the 1 and the 2 terabyte storage models will automatically offer you a whopping 16 gigs of RAM, and that also applies in the case of the 11 inches. You probably have heard it a million times by now. It is loaded with a monster of power. The Apple M1 chip with next generation neural engine. It is the exact one you will find on something like an Apple MacBook. And whatever they said or whatever you've heard about the M1 chip power is true. The processing power here is off the chain, except you won't be able to notice it if you buy this guy here just for day-to-day tasks, right? It's crazy powerful, but if you're just buying this so that you can check your emails, right, you just may not notice the difference. The design is the same as what we saw in the 2020 model, with slight differences in things like the weight, the depth, screen type, and also the fact that it does come loaded with a Thunderbolt 4 port. Other than that, it's pretty much the same physical attributes, right? So your power button, volume rocker, quad speaker setup, pretty loud, very good sound out of it, and as I mentioned, the Thunderbolt port. And let's talk about one of the main features that separate this iPad here from the 11 inches one. It's the display, right? This thing gets really bright. Peak brightness pushes up to 1600 nits with HDR content. That is very, very bright. Because if you think about it, the display on the 2021 11 inches iPad Pro pushes up to 600 nits, same as the 2020 iPad Pro, and this guy here does almost 3 times as much. Maybe not 3 times, but almost 3 times as much with HDR content, 1600 nits. So the display on this large iPad Pro is what Apple tags as the Liquid Retina XDR Mini LED backlit multi-touch display with IPS technology. You get very well pronounced colors. Blacks are very black, reds are also very red. It's a little bit as if you were looking at an OLED display, right? Needless to say that entertainment is just fantastic on here. Same with playing games, navigating the internet. Everything looks very nice on this tablet. Although there seems to be issues already popping up with this new display, the blooming effect, you may have heard of it, or blooming gate. Oh, by the way, before I forget, if this is your first time visiting the channel, welcome, of course. If you do like the content so far, I truly appreciate that. Please do me a huge favor. Hit both the like and the subscribe button there. It's a huge boost to this channel. Again, I very much appreciate that. All right, so going back to that issue. So you may have heard people talking about this kind of a hollowing effect around some objects, especially in high contrast situations where you're looking at something very bright with a black background. Now, if you did watch my AMOLED display versus mini LED display video, then you probably know that I wasn't aware of this issue until I stumbled upon it on Twitter. You know, people, it kind of blew up on Twitter a little. People were talking about it, and that's when I started paying close attention to it, and that's when I started noticing it. But it's not really prevalent. It's in rare situations, meaning just using your iPad on the regular light, you probably won't notice it. And even up until now, the settings really have to just be right before you can actually see that. When I look at areas that have a good level of contrast, or just general things with contrast with very dark and very white, I still don't see that blooming effect in every case. But in very, very rare situations like this one, and depending on the angle of the camera, you may be able to see a little something. The mini LED iPad Pro here is pushing a resolution of 2732 by 2048, and it is powered with 10,000 mini LED and a 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio. It also does support ProMotion here, so you can enjoy 120 Hz refresh rate. It's actually adaptive. You can enjoy that refresh rate here. I actually have a lot more details on just this display in my AMOLED display versus mini LED display video, so make sure to check that out if you want to learn a little bit more about this display. It's loaded with a 12 megapixel wide, a 10 megapixel ultra wide sensor, and Apple's LiDAR scanner on the camera module on the back there. On the front of the tablet here, of course, you have Face ID, and then you have a 12 megapixel true depth camera system with ultra wide. It takes pretty nice pictures and videos, so the quality is actually pretty good. And one of the special features of this new camera here is the ability to track movements and kind of adjust the camera so that it can keep you in the shot. Now let's go ahead and talk performance, because that's kind of the meat of things, right? Except if you're coming from a 2020 iPad Pro, you won't really experience anything truly different unless you're working with heavy projects, super heavy projects. In other words, unless you work with major projects that actually make practical use of that M1 chip, you may really not notice the difference. If we're talking speed, it is super fast, faster than it's ever been. For people who edit videos, this is the tablet to get. You know, it would offer you that full-blown computer power, all of that packed into this guy here. And that M1 chip is one of the reasons people who work with large files or very large projects or videos go after this guy. Visual art professionals are really after this new Liquid Retina XDR display. Everyday tasks on this iPad, that's really nothing. Navigating the internet, checking your emails, you know, watching videos, playing music, all that good stuff, that's nothing. Intensive graphic related or intensive graphic projects or intensive graphic gaming, you could definitely do that here. It handles all of them with no issues. Makes the experience really, really enjoyable with that beautiful screen, that beautiful mini LED backlit screen. Because you are looking at an 8-core GPU, an 8-core CPU, and as I mentioned, 8 gigs of RAM, and in some cases, if you're going for the one of this 2 terabytes, we are looking at 16 gigs of RAM. It also does support the Apple Pencil 2nd generation. I'm not going to elaborate on this much because we've done that more than a few times already on the channel. It works pretty well with it. I still hate the tapping sound, but other than that, it is fantastic with it. Battery has been decent, it's been okay. You know, they advertise 10 hours, but it's all going to depend on your type of usage. Now, here's my take. Just like I said during my iPad Pro 11 inches review, my hope is that Apple comes up with something similar to Samsung DeX, if you are familiar with Samsung DeX. If they can do that, it would really give more control to the user so that they can take a little bit more advantage of multitasking, because again, you can multitask on this guy here, but not as much as you would be able to on like a Samsung. And I like to take that because that's the closest competitor I can think of, right? If you have something that can be the equivalent of a Samsung DeX, if you have something like that on here, it would just take this tablet to the next level for the average person, because you already have professionals who make full use of all of the power that comes with this tablet. Other than that, not too many people can actually extract all of the power of this iPad, because you know, iPad OS. But if Apple could kind of focus on something that can expand the ability to multitask on this tablet, because I personally still think it's a little limited, and someone who's used a Pro Android tablet like a Galaxy Tab S7 would understand, you know what I mean. If you've used a Pro tablet where DeX allows you to do a multitude of things at the same time, you would understand that Apple needs to do something like that here. And I've heard quite a few people complain about it. But anyways, I'm gonna keep this here. I hope you found this informative. Please don't forget to like, comment, share this video if you know someone or anyone who would be interested in watching this. Make sure to subscribe also if you're not subscribed yet. I'm gonna catch you in the comment section. I'm also gonna catch you in the next video. And up until then, of course, as always, stay safe out there.